It's next to impossible in such a short time to adequately deal with such a raw and painful subject as the problem of suffering. But maybe in the short time we have together, I can create space for questions and point in the direction to find some fuller answers. A number of years ago, the BBC ran a global survey looking at the barriers of belief, and in the developed West, at the top, the biggest barrier to believing in God was the problem of pain and the unfairness of suffering. How can God be good when bad things happen to good people? It's considered a knockout punch that Christianity can't recover from. If suffering exists, God is either not powerful enough to stop it or not loving enough to care. Just yesterday, a close friend of mine going through a hard time told me, "You said that you would pray for me. You said there is a God, and yet this happened to me. There's a God?" I don't think so. In 2015, Stephen Fry appeared in The Meaning of Life, hosted by Gay Bahrain. When asked what he would say to God at the gates of heaven, this is what Fry replied. Fry said, "How dare you create a world in which there is such misery? It's not our fault. It's not right. It's utterly, utterly evil. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain?" Stephen Fry is absolutely right that we live in a world full of injustice and pain. But is he right that God created it like this? Is he right that God is mean-minded, stupid, and capricious? The day after that clip aired, I was in a hospice with a man who was dying with cancer. A man I knew well, a friend who, when it came to faith, I actually wasn't sure where he was at. And he asked me, "Did you hear what Fry said last night?" And my heart instantly sank. I took a breath and thought, how can I reply? Here's a man not talking about suffering in the abstract. Here's a man speaking about suffering in the raw and facing his own mortality through no fault of his own. And before I answered, he looked up at me and said, "I don't know what God Fry is talking about, but that's not the God I know. I know this God of the Bible has never left me." And John Stott's Cross of Christ may be the best book of his. In it, he writes in a chapter, Suffering and Glory, he quotes from Rolf Ateliander. And Rolf imagines a poor man from one of the favelas of Rio de Janeiro climbing up to the colossal statue of Christ 2,310 feet above Rio. It's called the Christ of Corcovado. And the poor man speaks to the statue. "I've climbed to you, Christ, from the filthy, confined quarters down there to put before you most respectfully these considerations. There are 900,000 of us down there in the slums of that splendid city, and you, Christ, do you remain up here at the Corcovado surrounded by divine glory? Go down there into the favelas. Come with me into the favelas and live with us down there. Don't stay away from us. Live among us and give us new faith in you and in the Father. Amen." What would Jesus say in response to such a prayer? Would he not say, "I did come to live among you, and I live among you still"? After Auschwitz, said Richard Rubinstein, after Auschwitz, it is impossible to believe in God. This is what he writes. "Never shall I forget the smoke of the crematorium. Never shall I forget the flames which consumed my faith forever. Never shall I forget those moments which murdered my God, my soul, and turned my dreams to dust." He wrote Psalms, talked of God, of his mysterious ways, of the sins of the Jewish people and of their future deliverance. But I had ceased to pray. How I sympathized with Job. I did not deny God's existence, but I doubted his absolute justice. John Stott later writes this, "I could never myself believe in God if it were not for the cross. The only God I believe in is the one Nietzsche ridiculed as God on the cross. In the real world of pain, how can one worship a God who is immune to it? I've entered many Buddhist temples in different Asian countries around the world and stood before the statue of Buddha, his legs crossed, arms folded, eyes closed, the ghost of a smile playing around his mouth, a remote look in his face detached from the agonies of the world. But each time I've had to turn away. Why would he do such a thing? Each time I had to turn away, and in imagination I have turned instead to that lonely, twisted torture figure on the cross, nails through his hands and feet, back lacerated, limbs wrenched, brow bleeding, mouth dry, intolerably thirsty, plunged in God-forsaken darkness. That is the God for me. He laid aside his immunity to pain. He entered a world of flesh and blood, tears and death. He suffered for us. The playlet, The Long Silence, says it all. And if you've got time, look it up. Bishop Justin Welby, whenever he goes to conferences, is asked the same question, what about suffering? And his answer is always remarkable, considering what he and his wife went through after the loss of his child in a terrible accident. I don't have simple answers, but I do know, he said, I am held in arms that are stronger than mine. It's all about Jesus. What does he mean? It's about the Jesus who never diminishes your sorrow, never diminishes your pain. It's about Jesus who weeps with you. Corrie ten Boom, having survived the same concentration camps, said this, no pit is so deep that he is not deeper still. With Jesus, even in our darkest moments, the best remains and the very best is yet to be. It's about the Jesus who suffered in life and suffered in death. There are no glib, simple answers to what you're going through. But this is what I have held on to and found to be true. Life is filled with questions and fear. There are lots of dark valleys. The most repeated command in the Bible is don't be afraid. God even knows that you would feel afraid and even gives you the words and says in Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? Something we might feel, but for us that would never be true, but only true of Jesus. And this is what I hold on to. Suffering, injustice, and grief isn't allowed to define a world. The grave, because of Jesus, isn't the destination. The empty tomb comes after the cross. And right at the end of the Bible, you read this in Revelation chapter 21. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, behold, I am making all things new. Tears wiped away with hands scarred with nails. Tears wiped away, never to return. The BBC survey in the Western developing countries said the biggest reason not to believe was the problem of suffering. How dare you, God? In developing countries, the biggest reason to believe, where suffering is a scale we can't imagine, is the problem of suffering. Even now in Ukraine, the biggest request is for a Bible. It's unto our world that he stepped. It's in our dark valleys that he promised to walk. It's good that he can bring even from evil. It is our tears that he shed. And for us, he suffered so that the destination wouldn't be the grave. We often speak about morning and night. The Bible actually does that differently. It speaks about there was evening and then there was morning. It's all about Jesus. There was evening, the cross, and then there was the morning, the empty tomb. Suffering matters, but the only way to make sense of it is to ask, what's the destination? Who can rescue us even from the grave? My closest friend lost his first child just at the age of 6 weeks. Then they had a boy who sadly passed away with flu at just such a young age. And I remember when they were interviewed, speaking about their circumstance, Joe, his wife, said, I have hope because I know that one day me and my children will dance in heaven with Jesus. There is a beginning planned in the purpose of God. There is a destination. And unless we understand our beginning and end, the bit in the middle doesn't make any sense.